husband attended regularly. The Irish President, Patrick Hillary, was among the mourners, but apart from the floral tributes, this wasn't a day for celebrities. The Andrews family wanted the people of Dublin to attend, and attend they did in their hundreds.
Because he's Irish and we're Irish and one of our own, and it's very sad that he's gone because he was a fantastic person.
The small church was packed as mourners heard about Eamonn Andrews, the committed professional, and Eamonn Andrews, the family man.
Remember too, for his professionalism, his constant striving for perfection in anything and everything that he did.
After the Mass, he was taken away to be buried in an Irish cemetery close to the people who admired him so much. Simon Marks, ITN, Dublin.
The pop tycoon Richard Branson has launched his nationwide campaign to flood Britain with cut-price condoms to combat AIDS. Some 30 million condoms named Mates went on sale today.
The aim is to make condoms cheap and as easy to buy as a packet of chewing gum. They will be on sale in newsagents, garages, department stores and most particularly in places where the under-25s shop. Celebrities joined doctors working in AIDS research to get the message across.
We should get over this thing, oh, sex isn't as good with one on or not. You know, well, if the choice is catching a lethal disease, then it certainly is, and that is the choice now. That's the only choice now.
Both the ITV network and the BBC are taking part in a major information campaign.
She's not embarrassed, so why should you be? And a packet of Mates condoms, please.
Of course. Mr. Williams, how much are these Mates condoms?
Critics argue that this will simply encourage promiscuity, but doctors say by 1991, 10,000 Britons will have died from AIDS, and unless condoms become widely used, it could be many more.
Finally, Cathy Humphreys, the 11-year-old schoolgirl who nearly died after a knife attack in January, has been honoured for her bravery. She got one of the Champion Children of the Year awards at the Dorchester Hotel in London and had lunch with the Princess of Wales.
Cathy was one of 10 children receiving awards today. She's obviously almost fully recovered, but says she still has nightmares.
Well, I've kind of gone out to occasionally, but not very often.
And you're right as rain now, are you? Back at school and everything? Terrific. You're looking forward to meeting Lady Princess Diana? What are you going to say to her? Did you get a chance?
I'm not sure yet.
When the big moment finally arrived, Princess Diana seemed to do most of the talking. There were awards for dance, drama, sport, bravery like Cathy's, and triumph over adversity like Claire Bosworth from Derbyshire, seriously ill with leukemia, too ill even yesterday to raise her head. But she was determined to meet the Princess of Wales, and that determination helped her undertake today what last night had seemed like an impossible journey. Vernon Mann, ITN, at the Dorchester Hotel.
And that's it. Good night to you.
Hello, good evening to you. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Calendar, and tonight's main news. Police in Leeds hunt an armed rapist after a vicious attack on a 28-year-old woman. And the Derbyshire dustbin strike spreads to a second depot. 40,000 homes are now affected. The details behind those headlines coming up in a moment.
And as the people of Enniskillen bury their dead after Sunday's bomb outrage, I shall be talking to 3 people who are trying to pick up the pieces in Ireland's shattered communities and trying to give peace a chance. And that's later in the programme, but first today's main news from Ruth Pitt at the news desk.
West Yorkshire police are hunting a man who raped a woman at knife point. The masked attacker grabbed his victim as she walked along a road in Leeds. Robert Hall sends this report.
The attack happened at 8:30 last night as a 28-year-old woman was walking down Pepper Road, an industrial area in the south of the city. Police say that as she passed this alleyway, she was grabbed by a masked man, dragged in at knife point and sexually assaulted. The attacker is described as white, in his late teens or early 20s, around 5'7" tall and of slim build. He was wearing a dark combat jacket, a woolen hat which he used as a mask, and yellow rubber gloves.
The offender came along Pepper Road and ran across the playing fields, pursued indeed by a witness, but he soon lost him in the darkness, and he made his escape over the wall, leading into the apartments at the end of the playing fields, known as Sussex Gardens, and there we lost him, I'm afraid.
Today, task force officers were searching nearby playing fields for the weapon which police believe the attacker may have dropped as he fled. His route suggests he may have known the area, and other officers have begun a systematic check of the housing estates which lie around 500 yards from the scene of the attack. They'll be interviewing several hundred householders in the hopes that the man they're hunting may be known here.
What is important is that other people will have seen this man, either before the attack or following his escape. So anyone that saw anything that was in Pepper Road, come forward.
As the hunt goes on, the victim is now recovering from her ordeal and being interviewed by detectives from West Yorkshire's Rape Investigation Unit. Anyone who thinks they can help with information should contact Holbeck Police on leads 435 353. That's leads 435 353.
A Lincolnshire man claims his foster son has been kidnapped by the boy's real father and taken to Ghana. The 9-year-old boy, Nana Dua Agimang, has been in the care of an English family in Boston for 8 years. He disappeared from his home in Wyberton last week. Police have been watching ports and airports, but it's feared he may have been taken out of the country. Now Interpol are involved in tracing the boy. 2 pensioners have died in separate house fires in South Yorkshire this afternoon. A 72-year-old man died from the effects of smoke after a blaze at Maple Leaf Court in Mexborough. He was found by a warden in his flat. And at Winkerbank in Sheffield, 88-year-old Hilda Hammond was killed when a chip pan caught fire at her home on Jedburgh Drive. Council workmen broke into the house and dragged her out after spotting flames, but she was dead on arrival at the Northern General Hospital. 7 children were taken to hospital today after fire broke out at their home in Sheffield. The blaze began in the early hours of the morning in the kitchen of their house at Catherine Road in Burngreave. The youngsters were treated for the effects of smoke. Their parents also escaped with minor injuries. The cause of the fire is being investigated. Meanwhile, there were long delays on the A64 at Bramham Crossroads between Leeds and York this afternoon when a lorry caught fire. 3 fire engines were called out. No one was injured, but there were long tailbacks. The lorry was carrying a load of soil. The dustman's dispute in North Derbyshire has escalated today and nearly 40,000 people are now affected. Both sides claim they're willing to talk, but there's no sign of a return to work. Ian McBride reports.
There are now 2 disputes in North Derbyshire. The first centres on the closure of the Glapwell tip. Extra rubbish is now being taken to Cryche near Matlock. The men say this has extended their working day. They demanded an extra £3 per man each week to travel to Matlock. After initial opposition, the council has agreed to pay that, on condition the men accept new performance targets. But the men say the targets are totally unreasonable.
I think it's unrealistic and they cannot be achieved.
Why do you think that?
Too much work. Just too much workload.
It'll go on for as long as it takes. As far, you know, we're quite prepared to sit around the table and talk. As far as I know, we're waiting now to convene a meeting with the council and get it resolved.
Oh no, they're not unfair at all. I mean, these are something that it's nothing new to impose targets. District councils responsible for collecting refuse have always had targets. It has to be worked this way. We've 37,000 properties, we operate a number of vehicles, and these are expected to clear the allotted amount every week.
The men say they're prepared to stay out until their weekly targets are renegotiated. Although some collections continue normally, 37,000 people now face the prospect of rubbish piling up outside their homes.
As you may have seen on the national news, the first 3 funerals were held today for the victims of the Enniskillen bomb outrage. The town's businesses, shops and schools all closed down as a mark of respect as the mourners lined the streets of the town. The first to be buried were police reservist Ted Armstrong, whose funeral cortege is seen here moving slowly past the shattered remains of the bombed building. And also held today was the funeral of student nurse Mary Wilson. Whilst the shock, the anger and the grief at Sunday's massacre at the Enniskillen cenotaph have been universal, for one group of people who are currently in this region, it has been a particularly personal blow. For 10 years now, the Peace and Reconciliation Group in the city of Londonderry has been trying to edge the 2 communities, Protestant and Catholic, closer together, to to end the mutual fear and suspicion and to replace it with some degree of trust. Outrages like Sundays can only result in a grievous blow to that work. Well, Jimmy Duffy, Margaret O'Donnell and Peter Simpson are currently in this region talking to schools about their work for peace. Tonight they join us in the studio. Margaret O'Donnell, as chairperson of the group, your organisation has dealt with the after effects of many terrible incidents. Was there anything that's made this one even worse for you?
Yes, there's an added dimension of horror to this particular tragedy because it comprised of a desecration of a memorial to all the dead from the entire community.
Now, had you not been over here on this speaking tour in schools, you would have been laying your own wreath at the memorial in Londonderry on Sunday, wouldn't you?
That's correct. Each year we lay a wreath for all the dead from our own city and from the surrounding area. That's the list there.
That is just a list of people who have died in the troubles from your own city.
And our own
How many?
city. 265 from our own city and the surrounding district.
And that includes ordinary people,
yes,
civilians,
yes,
soldiers, policemen,
yes,
the lot. Peter Simpson, aren't you ever then tempted to give up when events like this happen? Don't you ever feel that working for peace and reconciliation is simply not worth it because it's simply not possible?
Yes, momentarily everybody feels that way. But when we heard the news, it wasn't readily apparent that it was Enniskillen, and we, for some horrible minutes, we thought perhaps our own friends had caught it in Londonderry. They were laying a wreath on our behalf. The work itself is going to be made a lot more difficult by this sort of outrage. It always is. But it won't stop. We will have to carry on.
Now, as a peace group, you do controversial things, don't you? I know for a fact that you talk to the paramilitaries on both sides. You talk to the men of violence because you think it helps prevent people being killed. But I imagine a lot of people, perhaps on this side of the water in this country, would say just talking to men of violence encourages them. It gives them a credibility. Don't you agree with that?
No, I'm afraid I do not, no. We are great believers and we must speak to everyone, right across the divide. If you have got 10 groups in our city of Derry, you must speak to the whole 10, because if you speak to 9 and leave one group out, irrespective if they're a political group or a paramilitary group, then whether you like it or not, you are being sectarian. And the only hope that we have is to save someone's life. Just maybe by speaking to these people, we have saved someone's life. Or to save some family from being burnt out, then we do not apologise. We will speak to everyone, because in our city, that's our game. Speak to everyone to save lives and keep everything, get the people together.
But trust, you see, is a quality which is in very short supply, isn't it, between the two communities in Northern Ireland. If you're to succeed as peace workers, you've obviously got to have that trust. You've got to make people trust you. How do you do that? How do you make people in this divided society trust you?
Well, by the people who come into our office for help. They know whenever they go out that it is never mentioned outside of our office, the people we have helped. I mean, the many years that they're going here, I've only been there from 1980. That trust and confidentiality, in other words, has never, ever been broken. So the paramilitaries who we speak to also the RUC and the Army, and they know that our trust has never been broken. So you must earn your trust, and I think maybe we have just earned that.
See, what I suppose people perhaps in this country would find hard to accept, sort of things you do in Londonderry to bring the communities together. You arrange football matches, don't you, between Protestants and Catholics. It seems a simple enough thing to us here in Yorkshire or Nottinghamshire or Lincolnshire, wherever. But how do you actually get them to come together, and what sort of problems does that rise for you?
You have to know people in the community, for starters. We always felt our first good step was that we're all community workers. And being a community worker, you'll know a community worker in another area, and you can ring them up and say, look, if we provide the transport, will a group of young people from your area play with a group of our area? And we promise to pick them up and leave them back so that the parents are reassured and that people know where they're going and who they're going with. It's essential to know people, otherwise people won't trust you.
Let me just ask you this then finally, Peter, despite the setback of this weekend, despite what happened at Enniskillen, do you think that perhaps through your sort of efforts, peace can eventually come to your troubled country?
We work with what's possible, and we have to keep on hoping. Nobody knows what's around the corner, but we have to keep on hoping that we can find an alternative that will be acceptable to people.
I'm sure everybody who's watching would only wish you every possible success in the days, weeks, months, years ahead. Thank you all very much.
Well, Geoff was talking to members of the Londonderry Peace and Reconciliation group who are working to bring hope to the continuing tragedy of Northern Ireland. And now we're going to change the mood and to demonstrate that not all the news is gloomy, because a 12-year-old schoolboy from West Yorkshire has been enjoying a work experience day with a difference. Gareth Jinks from Leeds was challenged to spend a day with the city's cleansing department after he complained that dustmen don't work hard enough. And as Robert Hall reports, Gareth's day began with a roll call at the crack of dawn.
Right, good morning, Gareth. Good morning, lads. This is Gareth.
Morning, Gareth.
This is the crew that you'll be working with this morning. Take care of him, make sure no harm comes to him. Let's get out there and do some work. OK?
Now, a day out with the rubbish in the pouring rain is hardly anyone's idea of fun. But 12-year-old Gareth Jinks was out to prove a point. You see, he'd accused Leeds bin men of not working hard enough.
When I left my house one morning, bin men have been and they'd left some rubbish in, you see. And one of them with rubbish in, I didn't think they'd do any work hardly.
And Gareth, who we can see here, he was quite emphatic that the refuse collectors, in his opinion, had an easy task. This wasn't a one-off comment, it was made quite a number of times, and we took him to task on it, and here he is today.
Now, those comments came during a special lecture on the environment at John Smeaton Comprehensive in Leeds. 4 hours into his day, the new bin man was regretting he'd ever spoken.
Well, he's beginning to show signs of being aware of the foolishness of his comments.
Well, let's call him over. Gareth, come over here a minute. How are you getting on?
I'm doing all right.
Is it... So, are you sorry you said all those things now, Mr. Bath?
Yeah.
How many miles do you think you've walked today?
Oh, I can't say really. I lost count.
Have you ever been so tired before?
No.
Now, what are you to say in front of Mr. Bath now? Exactly what you think of bin men after all this?
Very hard working. Very nice to talk to.
And you withdraw your statements?
I withdraw my statement.
But you're not going to ask Mr. Bath for a job?
No.
Just to show there were no hard feelings, they let him off early. The school and the authority felt a useful learning exercise had been achieved. As for Gareth, I don't think he'll be rubbishing the bin men again.
Well, if he thinks bin men don't work hard enough, good job he doesn't know what TV reporters do during the day. Anyway, Gareth Jinks, great name. People were waving to him saying, "Hi, Jinks." Great. Coming up in part 2, the rest of the day's news, and our special guest, Mr. Ben Elton.
Times have changed, but the great smell of Bisto will always bring them running. Real meat stock goes into Bisto gravy granules to make delicious, rich Bisto gravy that's ready whenever you want.
Ah, Bisto.
They gave me nothing, but they can't come in. They gave me nothing, but they can't come in. They gave me nothing, but they can't come in. You got another day, I'll tell you again. They gave me nothing, but they can't come in. You got tomorrow, and I'll tell you again.
I keep all the heavy industry out of the Thompson Local, so the numbers you're looking for are easier to find. For the local answer, ask Thompson.
Well, you know, I reckon it's pretty fair to say that most of our members of Parliament would count that the righting of wrongs was one of their top priorities. But at the moment, one of our MPs is turning his attention away from social inequalities to the inequalities at the top of the Football League. Joe Ashton, the Labour MP for Bassetlaw and a passionate Sheffield Wednesday fan to boot, is worried that the big clubs like Liverpool are creaming off all the top talent in the game. The league leaders have costly international players like Paul Walsh, Jan Molby and Ray Houghton on the sidelines, and they could possibly field 2 First Division sides. Well, now he's tabled a House of Commons motion suggesting that these big money clubs should have points deducted from them to make the championship race fairer and more exciting. So, Joe, this is like a sort of jockey being handicapped, is it?
That's right, like the jockey club. And what would happen is that the Football League would say, well, Liverpool's hogged all the best players, they always win the championship, we'll make them start 6 or 10 points behind everybody else. And then you see on the last day of the season, when you've got 6 clubs, 6 cities involved in a photo finish, think of the excitement that would be generated. I mean, all the excitement last year was about Lincoln going out of the league and Scarborough, and it was at the bottom of the 4th division, the playoffs. It was the lower leagues where they were excited. Top of the First Division was finished by Easter.
Yeah, you're saying it's a bit boring because Liverpool sort of always win.
Well, of course. Yeah. And now they've got a situation where they sell a player for £3 million to Italy or Spain. They then buy 5 or 6 top English players with that, sit them in the reserve so as nobody else can get them, and it's making the game sterile. Now, 10 years ago, Ipswich, or even when Leeds won it, they would build their own team, and then they would maybe buy 1 or 2, but they would play them. They didn't buy them to stop the other clubs.
Now, apart from putting this motion down in the House, you're also going to see the league itself on you. What's their reaction
like? We met Bob Maxwell about this last week. This was brought up then when 30 MPs met him. He said nothing could be done. We're meeting Philip Carter, who's chairman of Everton, chairman of the league tomorrow, and we'll put it to him again then. But it's going to spread throughout the world. I mean, it's happening in Spain, Italy, up in South America. The big clubs get in front and their checkbooks are so fat nobody can catch them. I mean, you had Sheffield Wednesday, for instance, went to Everton and offered 700,000 quid for a centre-half in the reserves. They wouldn't sell. They could afford to sit on that money because they'd sold Lineker for £3 million.
I mean, in many ways, we like House of Commons members to be sort of very active in all sorts of fields. But it's none of their business, really, is it? Are you just a bit disappointed because Sheffield Wednesday aren't doing all that well in the league?
Not really. I mean, it's to get more competition. Obviously, football is a major sport. I mean, the interest in football is phenomenal. That's why every paper has 3 pages of it every day. And if we can lighten, not much light in the life of the unemployed, is it, except watching the local football team. In the north, it's the only thing we've got, really.
Wouldn't the best idea do what Yorkshire cricket does? And if you could only play for Sheffield if you're born in Sheffield, only play for Rotherham if you're born in Rotherham. Wouldn't that be better?
Well, it would.
Scrap transfers altogether.
It would, but I think it's too far away, and I don't think you're going to get that. But I mean, this will come. In 20 years' time, they will have this sort of handicapping, I'm certain of it.
Right, and the final question, what are you doing in our Leeds studio when you should be in the House of Commons working?
Well, it's only the Felixstowe Doxon Harbour Board bill tonight. I think they need my voice more at Hillsborough shouting for Wednesday. We're playing ball, but I'm having a night off.
You've always got the answer. OK, we'll see what happens. Thanks a lot. And now let's catch up with the rest of the day's news from Ruth.
A West Yorkshire firm has won £1 million contract to supply equipment for the building of the Channel Tunnel. Fletcher Sutcliffe Wild from Wakefield have been building conveyors for 80 years for use in local mines. Now their machines are to be used for the 3 tunnels which will link England to France. The firm hopes to win other contracts worth £3 million. Sheffield is to make a bid to stage the Commonwealth Games. The news was announced as plans for Britain's biggest swimming complex were unveiled in the city. This report from Ian McBride.
The complex has been designed with the 1991 World Student Games in mind. But even if Sheffield's bid isn't successful, this £31 million project will still go ahead. It'll be built at Ponds Forge near the city centre, creating 300 temporary construction jobs when work starts next year, and 100 permanent jobs when the complex opens in 1990. 3 swimming pools around Sheffield, including the much-troubled 15-year-old Sheaf Valley Baths, will be demolished to make way for the new centre. Meanwhile, at today's announcement of the scheme, it was revealed that Sheffield hopes its probable success in attracting the Student Games will provide a springboard from which it can catch the Commonwealth Games.
Let's be clear that the Student Games is 3 times bigger than the Commonwealth Games. There's about 30 countries compete in the Commonwealth Games, or over 120 compete in the World Student Games. There isn't the range of sports, but you're talking about 8,000 competitors alone. Now, we feel that once we've done that and prove we can do it, and we're convinced we can do it, that will be enough to convince the people who organise the Commonwealth Games that Sheffield can do it. And we believe that the warmth of the Sheffield people will actually get across to athletes and the people in the power, if you like, who take the decisions, that this is the place to be.
Finance for the swimming complex, which will include Britain's first 10-lane 50-metre pool, will come from private backers, via a holding company which is being set up by the council. Also included in the scheme, which is expected to attract 1 million visitors through its doors each year, is a sports hall and international fitness centre. Sheffield hopes to prove it's in top shape to win a number of world sporting championships in the 1990s.
A public inquiry has opened in North Yorkshire to decide who owns 2,000 acres of moorland. The inquiry is being held in Skipton. Among those disputing the ownership of Grassington Moor are local historians, the Ramblers Association and the Open Space Society. They claim the moor belongs to the residents of Grassington. They dispute the right of the Duke of Devonshire to sell the land for £10,000 3 years ago. But the current owners say that documents showing the land belongs to local people are out of date. Doncaster Rovers are considering a move from their ground in Belle Vue. The club is struggling at the foot of the 3rd Division and falling gates are being partly blamed on the state of the stadium. 2 stands have had to be demolished for safety reasons and the capacity has dropped from 20 to 8,000. Rovers now want to sell their lease and build a new stadium outside the town. They're also considering redeveloping Belle Vue. The land is owned by Doncaster Council and it's worth about £10 million. A campaign has been launched in Sheffield to save a toddler who's wasting away. The 3-year-old girl can't eat normal food and doctors say unless she receives specialist